This episode is brought to you by Squarespace. One of the perks of owning a Fujifilm camera are all of the different film simulations that you can go about and shoot with. For a lot of people, this is the reason why they choose to shoot with Fujifilm cameras, and for good reasons. I mean, the film simulations that you can adjust and use as baselines are actually really amazing. But where the real magic happens is when you start to tweak the film simulations and create your own. And today I want to talk about my go-to 3 Fujifilm simulations that you can use pretty much for absolutely anything. And they even work on some of the older Fujifilm cameras like the X-E1, all the way up to some of the newer Fujifilm cameras like the X Pro 3 and X-T5. There's something in here for everyone, so I highly recommend you guys stay till the very end so you can see each and every film simulation along with the sample photographs. And with that said, let's jump into my go-to 3 Fujifilm simulations. Alright you guys, now before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about these simulations because I personally designed them to be more film-like. So part of the reason why I started to shoot with Fujifilm cameras is because when I don't want to pay for developing or if I don't want to shoot film, I want to be able to have a camera that can replicate the images and, you know, kind of the feel that you get from a film camera through a digital camera. So I opted for Fujifilm, and ever since then, I've been kind of tweaking my recipes to closely match what I see when I do shoot film. And I think I have these simulations dialed in just enough to where they start to feel a little bit more film-like. All right, you guys, so there are 3 Fujifilm simulations we're gonna be talking about today. 2 of them are color, and the last one is black and white. So let's kick it off with probably my favorite. This is the film simulation that I shoot about 99% of the time on my Fujifilm X Pro 2, mainly because it is extremely versatile. So the first film stock, folks, is called Kodachrome. Now, Kodachrome was a film produced by Kodak back in the day. I think it was like 1960s. I don't know when they discontinued it, but they did. And it was known for its crazy vibrant colors. If you've ever seen what slide film looks like, you guys know that slide film typically has very nice saturation. And one thing you can expect from the simulation is that the highlights are going to be nicely saturated and in color. And then when you look at the shadows, they are going to be a little bit darker, giving you that really cool slide film look that Kodachrome was supposedly supposed to give you. My main purpose with this simulation was to use it for street photography. Yeah, I really like the colors from this Fujifilm simulation, and I hope you guys do too. Now, to make this recipe, you're gonna start off with classic chrome as your base. And I'm gonna put everything up here on the screen so you guys can follow along, but I'm just gonna go over it quickly. Dynamic range, you wanna set to 200. For white balance, I typically like to set this at auto. Noise reduction, I have to -1. Highlight tone, this is very important. You wanna go to a +1. For shadow tone, you wanna put +2. And lastly, for sharpness, you want to put at +1. Now this is going to give you a slide film look. I actually have a whole separate video dedicated just to this film recipe, and I'm gonna leave it linked up here in the box above. I don't know if that's what YouTubers say nowadays, but I highly recommend you guys try to shoot this one. It is very fun, and it gives you some really nice colors. Like I said, a lot of the photographs that I make through the Fujifilm X Pro 2 is shot with this exact recipe, and if you add like a +1 exposure compensation here and there, you'll notice that the shadows can be revived a little bit more, but in trade, it does give you that legendary look and feel of Kodachrome. Now the next Fujifilm simulation is going to work on some of the older Fujifilm cameras. So if you don't have classic chrome as a base, don't feel bad. This next one is going to have you covered. So the next film recipe that I have for you guys is a variant of Portra 400. Now Portra 400 to me as a film is probably like my go-to favorite film of all time. How many times have I said go-to today? But ladies and gentlemen, this has to be one of the most accurate film simulations for Portra 400 that I have ever seen. Now, I want to give you a quick little disclaimer. This is not my recipe. I actually got it from 1 Month 2 Cameras video when she put it in the description. So I'm going to leave, you know, the owner of the film simulation, whoever made it, give them some credits right here. But this next recipe, you guys, is going to blow you away. But before we jump into that, if you want to blow your clients away, you might want to get started with your own professional website. And that brings us over into our next sponsor for this episode, the good folks over at Squarespace. Squarespace is your all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence and run your photography business. Now, luckily, Squarespace has a ton of award-winning templates that you guys can use within minutes to get your website up and running. You also have dedicated pages for an e-commerce shop, a portfolio, a gallery, and one of my newest favorite features, the appointment scheduling tab. This allows clients to see what times you have exactly available, and they can book you directly through your website, saving you and the client confusion. So to get started with your own professional website today, head over to squarespace.com/kingjapes and enter promo code kingjapes at checkout, and you guys can get 10% off of your first purchase of a domain or a website. Huge thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this episode. All right, you guys, let's get into it. So I was showing you guys some sample photos of this Portra 400 recipe, and I want you guys to note that you can modify these recipes just a little bit to kind of suit your taste. Everything that we're gonna be talking about today are just baselines that you can kind of use as your foundation. From here on out, just build with it and, adjust it to your liking. So to make this Portra 400 recipe, the first thing that you're going to need is Pro Neg High. Now with Pro Neg High, I like to cycle between 400 and 800 ISO. You can definitely push it up, but you want to keep the grain somewhat minimal, so I like to keep it between 400 and 800 ISO. Dynamic range set to 100, and then you're gonna go into your white balance. Now the white balance is very interesting. In the original recipe, I remember they have it set to between 6300 and 6700 Kelvin, which in my opinion is extremely, extremely warm. So rather than doing that, what I found best was go to your white balance under Kelvin and go to 5300. This is gonna give you sort of like a warmer but neutral kind of look to your photograph. Now, if you wanna go warmer, definitely bump it up. I recommend 55, maybe even 5900K. That is the max that I would go. Anything past that seems to be a little bit too warm, at least for my personal taste. But Portra 400 is somewhat of a neutral warm film, and so kind of play it by ear and just adjust based on how you feel. Now, once you hit 5300, what I'll do is I'll go to the white balance shift and I will shift it to -1 red, and then blue is still gonna maintain 0. So make sure you don't forget this step. Noise reduction I have set to -2. As for highlight tone, I have this actually set to -2. Shadow tone, I have it set to 0. Color, I have it set to 0. But most importantly, you wanna go into your sharpness and go to -2. Again, with Portra, you kind of wanna soften things up. And I noticed that with digital cameras, everything tends to be really nicely contrasty anyways, and it looks a little too clinical, which is why I like to have my sharpness set to -2, give it this nice soft feel to the image. But that is the Portra 400 recipe. And like I said, if you have Pro Negative High, which you should on all Fujifilm cameras, dating back to even like the XE1, this film recipe is going to blow you away. I personally really love it. And last but not least, you guys, for all of the black and white shooters out there, I wanted to throw this simulation in there because it is my go-to black and white film simulation. It's perfect, like I said, for street photography, as well as just kind of for like documenting just everyday life, anything that you would want to shoot black and white film with, and if you like Ilford HP5. So as I just mentioned, I kind of modeled this film simulation to be Ilfordy. This simulation is supposed to mimic Ilford HP5, which for those of you guys who do shoot film is one of the staples within all of the 35mm films. Now HP5, some of the characteristics that you can see is nice contrast. And with the actual film stock, if you wanted to add contrast, you needed to push it to like 800 or 1600 ISO. And I'm gonna show you how to replicate that through a digital camera. So for baselines, when it comes to HP5, I found the closest film simulation that is built into the Fuji cameras. Closest to HP5 is going to be Acros with the yellow filter. You can definitely shoot it without the yellow filter. That is gonna be built in, of course, into your camera. Once you have that set, go to dynamic range, 100. White balance, I'm gonna always keep this at auto, it's black and white. Noise reduction, I have it set to -1. Highlight tone is set to 0. Now when it comes to shadows, I have it set to +1. And then of course for sharpness, I have it set again to +1. Now this is going to give you a very nice and flat black and white photograph. It shouldn't be too contrasty. If you wanna add a little bit more contrast, I recommend going into your shadow tone and then adding another point, maybe going to +2. This is gonna give you a little bit of a deeper black in your shadows, and it's going to kind of enhance the look. So if you like that nice highlight cutting light with the shadow and the person walking, this is going to be a really good simulation for you. And Ilford HP5, like I said, is just one of the staples when it comes to the film photography community, which is why I wanted a film simulation very similar to it. But ladies and gentlemen, those are my favorite Fujifilm simulations, my go-tos, and I recommend every single one of these. I'm sure, like I said, there's something out there for everyone. They are going to be a little bit more based off of the actual film stocks, but you are going to get film stocks that look great everywhere you go in the world. So that's going to wrap it up for me. If you guys enjoyed this episode, drop a like down below, and also please hit that subscribe button. We are on the road to 200K. And if you want to see more Fujifilm videos, definitely, like I said, hit that subscribe button. So I'll see you guys in the next one, man. As always, this has been King Japes, Minolta Gang. Whew.